Theo Von, generally considered a sweetheart in the comedy community. Let's be honest about that. The guy has his moments. He's funny. I'm not here to argue that. But when does his comedy start, taking that Joe Rogan route? And now we're starting to see him in this podcast trying to joke around with a Border Patrol agent about getting Sean Strickland to handle these immigrants. Well, let's dive into it because I'm not here to criticize his comedy, but what I'm here to analyze is the fact that he might be going the Joe Rogan route where Joe Rogan experience used to be, about crazy conspiracy theories that had no real effect in real life and MMA and, sort of a green room into the comedy world. But now Theo Von is having on a Border Patrol agent and making statements that should generally be considered nativist. And beyond that, let's be honest about it, flirting with this white nationalist mindset. All right, let's pull this up. We'll start here with this.
Talking about going to the community, you brought up teaching. My wife's a lifelong educator, right? So this hits home. Let's think about some small town in the middle of America, right? Well, let's talk Covington.
It's always a small town. It's always a small town, isn't it? Because we know what small town is code for. A good Christian white community.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
All right. What if all of a sudden 100 Brazilian families who speak Portuguese showed up in Covington? Because is the Covington School District, is St. Tammany Parish going to be able to have Portuguese speakers there because we have an obligation to educate those children? Maybe there's one or two that could do it.
Maybe Linda Green, if she was the teacher, she was good.
But think about
Miss
all
Lewis.
people.
Can you imagine a Brazilians showing up and speaking a foreign language in your small town? Like the fear mongering, right? Is being hidden within like, oh, no, this is an educational concern. How are we going to have the resources to educate them because we're obligated to civilize these people? Well, no. Let's be very clear. This is fear mongering in the slickest form. In other words, do you want a bazillion Brazilians in your neighborhood, in your community, taking up resources in schools from your children in a small town? That is what is being expressed here. And Theo Von's trying to crack some jokes. And we'll see how his jokes turn into like hidden desires, anti-immigrant, nativist desires.
Yeah, there was definitely some great ones.
People from all over the world speaking all these different languages, but those are the type of things that we have to think about.
Right. You tax the system. Yeah. Now you have and now the students and the teachers in the town probably feel bad that they can't help.
Right.
So their morale is low.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do. Now they're like, teachers are up at night, like trying to learn Portuguese online.
Yeah.
And it's a nightmare. And
do you see how easy these comedians are manipulated into spreading xenophobic propaganda? Yeah, I'm sure there's countless teachers in small towns, code for white communities, staying up all night to learn a new language, to teach us poor immigrants, to be able to communicate with them. When we've seen countless of times, again and again, across, the world, how these white teachers harass students for simply having different cultural, worldviews. But they carry on here, and it gets interesting.
It becomes a deprecating cycle that doesn't get better if we just want people to come through the front door.
Yeah.
So we know who they are. They're invited guests, right? And we should be, and that goes back to the wide gates. We want to invite guests. I think charity starts at home.
All right. We want to invite guests. Now, in this entire interview, 2 hours and 30-something minutes, guess how many times they talk about European immigrants? Guess how many times they talk about European immigrants who overstay their visas? Take a wild guess. Go check it out for yourself. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. But you won't be surprised. Let's leave it at that. So here we have the common, excuse for the right. Oh, what about the poor people here? What about the children who would refuse to help regardless of the immigrant situation?
We need to clean up our own backyard. We've got homeless children, veterans, and all that stuff.
I
But-
totally agree.
But we can certainly invite guests in if we can control it and know who they are, what their, what the strengths and weaknesses are, where they're going, so we can apply resources that way. Because not only is it the educators, but the EMS and the first responders, something happens and they don't speak these languages,
Of course.
it becomes a challenge for
Ah.
everybody. So
It's a challenge for every part of the system to have all these foreigners who don't speak our language being injured. And now they need medical attention. And in order to understand the human body, you need to be able to speak every single language. It doesn't make sense. And the reality is, these right wingers, if you're like past your 50s like this guy, and you have a like mohawk, that's already a red flag over here. Whatever the hell you call this haircut. I call it like the Viking look, right? Where these guys think that they're living Vikings, like their ancestors are Vikings on that Joe Rogan bullshit, right? That's already a white nationalist in my book. I've never been wrong on that. But here you have them espousing these, fake tears. Oh, think about the first responders when they want to help somebody and they can't speak the language. I guess, you just got the... now a real American dies because you're busy trying to translate and Google, this foreign language. How ridiculous does this conversation get to where now the concern is, well, these medics can't help anybody out because they don't speak the language. They're bleeding out and they can't understand what's going on with their body and what's happening with them. So we want them here, but unfortunately, the language barrier is too much. And yet when these European immigrants come here illegally or overstay their visas, making them illegals, these illegal aliens, that's not a concern. Whether or not they speak the language or not, whether or not they're comfortable with English. But again, watch the 2 hours of this interview, 2 hours and 30 minutes, and ask yourself, take notes. How many times do they talk about Europeans? About European immigrants? They talk about Asians. They talk about Latin Americans. Hell, they even talk about Haitian and African immigrants. But not once did I hear about the issue of illegal European immigrants. All right, and let's get into what I really wanted to focus on here, which is the whole NYC debacle.
I mean, I don't want to broad brush anybody, but I think the majority of them are
You don't want to, come on.
want to do good. I mean, there's still there's going to be a good minority chunk of these people that are probably just not doing good. We've seen that in New York City, right?
He says, I don't want to, paint a broad stroke. I'm sure, the majority are good, but, there's a good minority, a good chunk who are here to be criminals, to take your white women, to rob you, to take your homes and your jobs, always the jobs. But, I'm sure the majority are fine. They're good. It's the whole Trump, I suppose some of them are good. Some of them are fine people. But they're always playing with language, these white nationalists. They're always playing with language. And it's so easy to do so with somebody like Theo Vaughn, who is, one, uneducated on the subject, but two, is already predisposed through the education system and through mass media to find immigrants as a threat to a white country. So here we go. They double down on the propaganda here.
Recently, the migrants that beat up the cops. I mean, those
Yeah.
are, I mean, that we
It's
got
a
to
bunch
get
of
that. We gotta
dangerous
get,
Goldilocks
we
up
gotta-
there, just running around in the house,
Yeah.
eating.
A bunch of dangerous Goldilocks. And this is where we start to see Theo Vaughn going from, hey, these are just jokes, to this is straight up like Minuteman propaganda here. These Goldilocks coming in to your home and just causing havoc. And pay attention to the video that they chose to play in this section, because we're going to expand on that shortly.
The honey,
Yeah.
able to shoot the bears if they come in, like that, you know, and they don't, it's not even their home. Like,
It's not even their home. They would have come in and take your honey. From the land of milk and honey, they would have come in and take your honey, come into your homes. And he even says, shoot the bears. You see what I'm saying? Theo Vaughn is literally saying over here, oh, these immigrants are going to come into your home, take your money, and they're able to kill you without any repercussion. But it's just a joke. It's Goldilocks. It's cool. It's fine. It's not xenophobic, nativist propaganda. No, not at all. Not at all. But let's look at the video that they chose to play in this section. Here we go. Look at the video.
I mean, I want a broad brush.
And you think it'd be up sooner, but here we are. They chose to play this version of the video. The beatdown of the poor innocent police officer. Let's look at why that's just complete and utter nativist propaganda here. The white nationalist media loved this, but even they were forced to address this and correct the statement. Correct the record here. Look at this. First, they'll play, the video that was the section that was infamous. This horde of brown immigrants coming into your country and abusing the poor, innocent police officers. Heartbreaking, really.
I do want to get back to a story that we have been tracking very closely, as the New York Police Department has released body camera footage of the attack on 2 officers by a group of migrants in Times Square. This happened last month. The video shows a man.
So it took about a month to reveal what actually went down that day.
In a yellow jacket, who is believed to be Yo Henry Brito, wrestling with the officers as that melee does ensue. Thursday, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg announced that 7 people had been indicted in connection with the January 27th attack. I do want to send it over to our Fox 5 New York team as they filed this report with a closer look at the video.
We're getting a better look from multiple angles.
So first, initially, what was put out there was just a cop being jumped.
Surrounding January 27th's violent beatdown.
Let's look at the actual events of that night.
The officers instruct them to go to.
The cops come over here and start harassing these people for standing around in Times Square. Look how huge the sidewalks are in New York. And everybody starts moving. And we have, the weakest link straggling behind. So like a predator does, all his friends are already ahead. A cop steps in, isolates him, and starts to harass him. Look at that. He's leaving, doing what he was told, listening, obeying orders, being quote unquote civilized, and the cop grabs him regardless. And so he tries to get away. Why wouldn't he? He's been, for no good reason, for no legitimate reason, harassed by the pigs here. And his friends, rightfully so, help him out. So a cop tried to abuse his power, and Theo Vaughn, with the Border Patrol agent over here, wants you to think that it's actually the cop that was the victim here. You see how they're always trying to make these authoritarian pigs out to be the true victims.
Get
Just
that we gotta
dangerous
get-
Goldilocks
yeah,
is
we
up
gotta-
there, just running around in the house,
Yeah.
eating the honey,
Yeah.
able to
So
just shoot the
hilarious.
bears if they come in, like that, you know, and they don't. It's not even their hunt. Like
Yeah.
there's, well, one thing it does is,
Yeah, that's
All right. They're bringing it back up right here.
fuck out.
they
To
have
be
no-
honest with
this,
you,
this
All right.
Step into this New York issue again, real quick. The surveillance footage recorded on January 27th.
Mind you, doing the research right then and there, so he can't really push back on the Border Patrol agent. Not that that's the objective of this interview. The objective of this interview is to garner sympathy for Border Patrol agents and to vilify immigrants, which is inherent in that sympathy.
Outside a Manhattan homeless shelter shows several men kicking officers on a sidewalk and trying to pry them off a man police had taken to the ground.
You see, even in this short clip here, it shows them listening to the cops and leaving. You think Theo Von's going to analyze the fact that they were obeying the police and the police still assaulted one of them, which resulted in his friends rightfully defending him, which is why they were let go. That's why they were released. Not even talking about the fact that they got the wrong people to begin with, or at least one wrong individual that was not involved in this.
Police have arrested 7 people in connection with the attack, though prosecutors dropped charges against one person they say may not.
You see how he's frustrated? He puts his hands up like, oh, they dropped charges. And then he has to read out that, well, one of them wasn't even involved in it.
Have been involved. I think if you don't prosecute or eliminate or get,
Eliminate.
well, it's tough because these
Eliminate.
people are obviously in a state of desperation.
Yeah, so pedal it back. What do you mean by eliminate, Theo Von?
They've been kind of released into a place where there's no clear path for them either, probably.
Right.
So they don't know what to do. And then you've put
No clear path.
but the fact that they're putting the officers at risk, any of that, you got to go.
Did you
I
see the
think you just
video
have
of
to
it?
So it's irrelevant the fact that the officers harassed them. They obeyed them. They listened to the officers, and one of them was still attacked regardless. So you want them what, to bend the knee to these pigs? Because these are the same type of like badass, 3%er types that love to imagine that they somehow will stand up against tyranny. But when you see it, when you actually see it, but it's brown people doing it, you want them eliminated, Theo Von? That's interesting.
You just
Video
have
of,
to-
of them when they were released that day after the assault. They're walking and
Oh
flipping
yeah,
the
just
camera.
flipping everybody
Yeah.
off. They don't care.
So
Why
think
wouldn't
about
They all
that.
think they're
Why wouldn't them? Why wouldn't they actually say fuck you to the media, to the propaganda machine that is spreading hatred against these people? First of all, they got the wrong person. And they were released because they had the body camera showing that they were actually obeying the law and they were still assaulted. So they actually stood up to tyranny. They stood up to tyranny. Which, if they were white, you would be applauding.
Jesus
so
Chavez.
that right there,
Second you kick a fucking cop though,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
I think it's a bad look to the people of desperation. They've been kind of released into a
All right.
place where there's no clear path for them either, probably.
Right.
So they don't know what to do. And then you've put, but the fact that they're putting the second you kick a fucking cop though,
Yeah,
dude,
yeah.
loose around Sean Strickland
Yeah, yeah.
will beat the
in New York.
that and uphold them.
Jesus.
That
Were released that day after the assault. They're walking and
oh
flipping
yeah,
the
just
camera.
flipping everybody
Yeah.
off.
Flipping everybody off.
They don't care.
So think about
They all
that.
think they're
So
Jesus Chavez
that
or
right
something.
They all think they're Cesar Chavez or something, is what Theo says. They all think they're Cesar Chavez. First of all, struggles to remember the name. So he's like, what's that spick? What's that one famous spick? There's a couple streets named after him. Yeah, Cesar Chavez. Well, here's the thing. Theo, he would agree with you. This is why I don't fuck with Cesar Chavez and why Theo would actually be a huge fan of him.
You say we maintain that agriculture is different. It's always been different. This is why agriculture and farm workers were never organized before. As long as we
Already kind of stating there's some difference in cultures, hinting at something deeper. Because Cesar Chavez saw himself as an American. He had to understand at this time, the other major farm workers were Filipinos, who actually were the ones that initiated the organization of farm workers. But let's hear this true American now.
have a poor country bordering California, it's going to be very difficult to win strikes, as strikes are won normally by other unions. We don't have an employer, as is the case right now in one of the strikes we have with the Butte Gas and Oil Company, where we've closed them down, then have been unable to get strike breakers, or we've gotten very few. And then all of a sudden, yesterday morning, they brought in 220 wetbacks. These are the illegals from Mexico. Now, there's no way to defend against that kind of strike.
So, no need to call them wetbacks. Even back then, it was a slur. It was understood. That is Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez was a nationalist through and through. He would agree with your nativist mindset, Theo Von. He would agree that these illegals, or what he would call wetbags, need to be eliminated. That's why I don't fuck with Cesar Chavez. But Theo Von, you're over here trying to like smear his name, which is very popular in certain circles, not even understanding that y'all would be on the same side of this issue. Because it's not actually about understanding the subject. It's about spreading anti-immigrant propaganda. But he takes it even further.
Their broad brushes all these migrants. Not all of them are that way.
Agreed.
Now, I mean, again, fortunately,
the second you kick a fucking cop, though, dude, I think it's a bad look to the people of this country who are still trying to obey the laws.
Yes.
That
remember, they were obeying the law. They were told to move, and they moved.
And uphold them.
Yep.
That you don't make a point, you're gone.
Well, that's the lack of consequences, right? These people, now I don't know all their story, but I know they were processed and released and went to New York. These people have been
get the fuck. I don't give a fuck who these people are. Get them the fuck out.
Again, never shows the portion, the section, and this was already out in public. It was already released of them listening and obeying the police officers and still being assaulted.
To be honest with you,
this is what we're talking about, right? This is him.
This is the guy right there, dude. Let that motherfucker loose around. Sean Strickland will beat the shit out of that.
This
dude
is what
in a heartbeat.
This is what pisses off the Border Patrol agents, because we were released that day after the assault. They're walking.
They're flipping everybody off. They don't care.
So think about.
They all think they're
so that
they all think that they're Cesar Chavez or something.
Fuck out. To be honest with you,
this is what we're talking about, right? This is him.
This is the guy right there, dude. Let that motherfucker loose around. Sean Strickland will beat the shit out of that.
Sean Strickland will beat the shit out of that guy. Sean Strickland. Theo Von knows Sean Strickland very closely. And in case y'all don't know Sean Strickland, former UFC middleweight champion, one of the most boring fighters out there. But he has a giant, he's a giant star now because of his right-wing viewpoints. Where do these right-wing viewpoints originate from? Every single time. Every single time. Sean Strickland details neo-Nazi past fighting salvation in MMA. Oh, how wholesome. Now, be aware, this Zionist over here on the right is an open, proud supporter of Israel. He was just recently there on vacation prior to October 7th and hid it because he's well aware of the human atrocities, the war crimes, and the settler colonial objective of the state of Israel. But here we have this interview with Sean Strickland where he opens up about his, so sad past as a neo-Nazi.
Permanent markers, like
Oh,
permanent markers,
gotcha.
like swastika.
Yep.
I remember, like, and but again, like, I don't know what the fuck that means. It's funny, like, there's American History X.
Yes.
So people always
He says, the audio is horrible on this, but he says, have you ever seen American History X?
ask me, like, when I was a kid, who did I want to be? And, like, that's who I wanted to be, was one of those guys. Like, that's,
Wow.
like, I thought they were so fucking cool, man.
So he saw American History X, and that's who he wanted to be as a kid.
I love the life they live, just, like, dirty white trash, I had respect, Yeah. So it's funny, when I was a kid, that was, like that was somebody, like, I would hero worship.
So this is a guy that Theo Von wants to sick on immigrants who were defending themselves from tyranny. A reformed neo-Nazi who's still spewing, xenophobia and countless other right-wing dribble. And they love him for it because his fighting style is just a jab, parry, right, every now and then, jab, jab, jab. That's all it is. He claims he's going to murder the fighter he's going to fight every single time and just tries jabbing them to death. So his fame is because of his right-wing viewpoints. Homophobia, transphobia. And it all originated from this neo-Nazi mindset. So he hasn't drifted that far from it. And that's what Theo Von wants to sick on these immigrants that were defending themselves, that were obeying the law.
This is what
in a heartbeat.
This is what pisses
Dude.
off the Border Patrol agents, because we've had to
Right.
process and release these type of people, and this is what they end up doing, right? This is
I will
not.
beat the horchata out of that motherfucker
yeah.
right there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I will beat the horchata out of that motherfucker right there. And the Border Patrol agent, retired, chuckles. Because see, when he gets to this point, it's no longer a joke. It's no longer a joke. What it becomes is white nationalist propaganda. Minstrel shows were a joke. They were done for comedic relief. We have a history in this country, and by we I mean these European settlers, to mask their emotions, their true thoughts behind jokes. All these quote unquote edgelords, oh, it's just comedy, man. I'm just being edgy. Walk into a blue collar break room, and it's already blue collar, so it's going to be dominated by brown and black people. And you will hear some of the most obscene shit ever spewed. I'm guilty of it. But it's all in good fun because we're all struggling, because we're all oppressed in one way or another. I might be brown, somebody who's lighter skinned than me might be undocumented. Somebody might have experienced racism because they're from the Middle East. Right? We have black people who are the most hated. Anti-blackness is global and it's internalized. And we're all able to make fun of each other in the most obscene way. But here, Theo Von is not making a joke. He's not making a joke. He's making a statement. He's putting down his flag of where he stands against these violent, dirty horde of immigrants coming into his country, unable to speak the language, taking up resources. So this is not a joking matter in this regard. He's masking it to make it more, easy to digest for his audience that may or may not be on the fence. Notice how they don't give the entire context. Because fundamentally, what these young men were doing were what all these right-wingers claim they're going to do, which is stand up against tyranny. They obeyed the officers, and they were still assaulted, and they defended their friend against a pig. And that's who he wants to sick a reform neo-Nazi against. That's who he wants to beat the horchata out of. It's not a joke. It's a white nationalist propaganda. Just keep that in mind. Hasta la próxima. Ya estuvo.